I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here and glad to have you along. KFAI, what a wonderful station this is. What a wonderful opportunity to share, to learn, to connect, to build, to weave, to imagine new futures. That conversation with Angela Davis, just amazing. And it fits into what we're talking about now. I'm pleased to have as a guest today Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. Keith, brother, good to see you. Welcome to the program.
Hey,
How you
thank you.
doing?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me back. You
Always,
know, I'm
always.
I'm glad I didn't say anything too crazy to not be invited back.
Well, you never do, and I think whatever you say comes from the heart and comes from the experience. It comes from the mind. You're thoughtful, and I think you're always considerate. You're planful, and I think you are deliberate and intentional. And I think those are gifts and traits that suit you, but suit your work, your leadership in the state of Minnesota, suit the voters well, the residents well. So thank you for being who you are, Keith Ellison. And
Thank you, brother.
what Angela Davis just said in response to um, Lisa, is it, I might be saying the name wrong, my previous host, um, Amy Goodman,
Oh
was
yeah.
that there's a need and opportunity to reimagine the world. That communications technology, in particular, and
Oh
both
yeah.
the obligation, the duty, and the right of those of us who are here and those who follow us, is to use this technology to bring new voices, broader, um, voices, a broader set of voices into the ideation, the creation of futures in which more of us, perhaps even all of us, can see ourselves winning. That the winning may not necessarily mean somebody has to lose. We can reconfigure, reimagine what winning means. So, in that spirit, I want to welcome you because I think you have always been a person who's pushed the boundary, expanded the possibility. And I say that thinking, I'll stop after this, Keith, that I'm grateful to you as an elected, both when you were in the state legislature and in the U.S. Congress, also with your role now as the Attorney General for the state of Minnesota. And I say that as a Black newspaper owner, Black media owner, that we haven't always had access to people, even electeds, in positions of power. And maybe there wasn't an intentional lack of access, but there wasn't the experience, and there certainly wasn't the invitation, and there certainly was the chilliness of not being expected to be in certain spaces. You have sort of cracked that mold, you and others, by both inviting and ensuring, and expecting us to be there, not to support you in particular, but to support telling the truth and giving our
Yeah.
people access. So for that, I thank you. I want to throw that out to you, first of all.
Well, let me throw it back to you. I really appreciate your accessibility, but let me just tell you a simple thing that I would wish that I hope more elected officials and policymakers think about. In a world where people are experiencing a geyser of information, it is extremely difficult to figure out what's really what. You can get on the internet and hear almost anything that you are inclined to want to hear.
Mhm.
You can hear that the vaccine makes you magnetic. It doesn't. You can hear that anything, any kind of stuff. But so now is the era in which trusted news sources become much more important because sure, I can click on anywhere and Alex Jones is saying something insane. And if I'm feeling vulnerable and things don't seem to be working out for me, and I might want to hear that. But who is going to step up and say, like it or don't like it, here's what really is happening?
Mhm.
We're not lying to you, right? Here's what it truly is. That is going to be something that's going to have an increased market value um, because we're in the age of misinformation, disinformation,
Yep.
no information, but massive expression.
Yep.
So I think that you this is your moment, bro. This is your moment. You can build a brand. You can say, look, you don't like it, or do you do like it? but we're bringing you diverse points of opinion. If we have a bias, we'll tell you what it is, but otherwise we're telling you the truth. So I think that this is a market. I think this is an opportunity for the press that I don't think should be allowed to go by because we used to have the problem of not enough information. Now
Yep.
we got a problem of massive information, and
Overload.
we're in the same position as we used to be. What do you want to believe? And you should believe those who consistently and reliably tell you what's really going on.
Let me welcome my colleague and co-host for today, Tom Guitar. Tom Guitar is the owner and publisher of Imshali.
Hey, kid.
And just a wonderful human being, a great businessman, a leader along with me in the Minnesota Multicultural Media Consortium, and a person that brings a wide view of what's happening internationally, nationally to the community that we serve. So I asked Tom to join us just to connect with you. Keith, I wanted to ask you to sort of
Can I say something real quick?
Go right ahead, sure.
East Africa, Tom, you're from Kenya originally, right?
Yes, I am, kid.
Well, East Africa's been on my mind a lot. We now there is a open conflict between the president and the vice president in Somalia. There is turmoil in Ethiopia. There is trouble in Sudan. I'm telling you, the region is facing a lot of conflict, and there's a lot of people whose roots are in East Africa living in the Twin Cities, and a lot of people whose roots are from Africa generally in the Twin Cities, and a lot of people who may never have been there, but they just like to know what's happening in the rest of the world. So I think that after the many years that I remember the TFG, transitional federal government. Then I remember we got a president. Then I remember we had numerous successions. And now to think that the president in Somalia is doing a Trump-like thing where he's even lost his mandate, but he has not left the presidency.
I know.
And so he's just saying, well, I'm still president anyway. And you know what? This is the danger of a Trump, because he's saying, look, even the great United States, 200 years of democracy is saying the president's saying won't concede. I'm not going to concede.
Yep.
And so this is the problem that we have in this moment. And I just think that people who listen to the show should know, Tom, not that you only are here to talk about East Africa, because you talk about everything.
Yes.
You talk about everything, but you do have a certain specialization in that. So I thought I just want to bring it to light. Forgive me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's the region, as you said, is in some really serious trouble. I mean, and it touches everywhere, even a place like Kenya or Uganda that are relatively peaceful. The conflict spills over and affects everybody in the region. And as you just ably said, a lot of us have roots back there. A lot of Minnesotans have lots of families back there. So a lot of people have been having sleepless nights, whether they are originally from Ethiopia, Somalia, or Sudan. And then, of course, Kenya as well, because, as I said, the conflict just affects everyone. And it's not good for anyone.
Well, every Kenyan knows that political turmoil in Somalia means refugee crisis in Kenya.
Yep. Yes.
I've been up to Dadaab myself, and have been at a refugee camp, and in Kenya, and I remember they were pouring over that border 6,000 people a day. And the refugee camp built for 90,000 people had 300,000 people in it.
Correct.
And had 3 doctors, for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, you'll be hard pressed to find anyone from Somalia that is currently a Minnesota resident that didn't go through Kenya.
Right.
So very few of them. Very few of them. Majority actually just came through Kenya. So so it's something that worries us day and night. We just wish we could move past what is happening right now, but we have to deal with it.
Well, something we all need to keep our eyes on.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. My co-host today, Tom Guitar, publisher of Imshali newspaper. Our guest, Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. Keith, this is a wonderful turn of conversation. I want to stick with this because I called you to give us a debriefing on what happened with the Potter trial, Kim Potter trial, and I want to do that. But before we do that, I think the conversation we're having is equally important. I'm glad that you called this to our attention, because what you're saying is that international is our domain as well. We have a right to it and a need
we
to
live in the
be
world.
aware and to have our thoughts, our energies, and our interest represented.
Yes.
And so, I guess I'd like to have a sense from you and Tom about the color, the nature of the conflict in Ethiopia and the Tigrayan people. That's one.
Yeah.
And then secondly, what your take is on the conflict in Sudan, because that conflict is between people in the capital, in the Khartoum, in the traditional old Sudan. It's away from, but connected to the conflict between Sudan and South Sudan. How do you weigh all of that? And what do you say and what do you see, Keith Ellison?
Well, it's funny to think about Sudan. This is a country that has been, Sudan is a complicated country because, geographically, it's like it's the biggest or one of the biggest countries in Africa, and it sits on the Nile, and which breaks into the Blue Nile and then the White Nile, and it's in a region that really does have where drought and climate change are a serious problem, and those geologic and weatherographic struggles really have social impacts, right? Really, you have these conflicts between growers and herders. You have conflicts, and interesting thing about Sudan is you've had the central government that's had conflict with the people in Western Sudan, Southern Sudan. That's why they broke off, and even Eastern Sudan. But it all revolves around power, right? So you had Omar Bashir there for many years, and I was there. I met Omar Bashir accidentally. One time I was in Khartoum, and I was going to a mosque, and somebody rolled up beside me in a big black Jeep, and they all came in, and he stood next to me and prayed. They took pictures, and I'm like, okay, that's Omar Bashir, Anyway, no problem with that. But my point is that that's a country where you've had a dictator who is engaged in human rights abuses for a long time. He got deposed, and now here they are trying to pull together a government again. And the problem is in Sudan is that you have conflict all over again. And as I mentioned before, the country literally split between North and South a few years ago, and now Sudan itself is having another political crisis because things just over this issue of power, and young people standing up doing all they can to try to have a stable government, but the Sudanese people, irrepressible as they are insisting that they're going to have true democratic rule, and the people in power say, no, you're not. I'm going to run everything. So that's sort of the very, very snapshot of the situation. Moving over to Ethiopia, another country where there have been years of political turmoil for a long time. And again, an Ethiopia expert would be able to tell it much better than me. But for years and years, there were people who felt that the Amharic dominated the country, and the Tigray and the Oromo and the others were sort of on the fringe of society. Then that changed, and you had a Tigray government, which was known for human rights abuses, and then you had this movement of the Oromo people who are in large numbers there and historically oppressed. And then you had another shift in government where you thought there was going to be a relief to some of these things, and then here we are again in the midst of another political crisis. And so you have a lot of instability. One thing I'll tell you, that in the entire region, climate change is not a theoretical concept. It's a real thing, and it exacerbates tensions. People fight over water. I wouldn't be surprised in the next 10, 12 years that there was military conflict between Egypt and Ethiopia over the Nile.
It's a big one.
And so the region really does need diplomatic cooperation to make sure
Mhm.
everybody survives, and it needs leaders that understand the bigger picture. And the sad reality is, you got people who say, "I'm only looking out for my people. I don't care about anybody else." And you
Mhm.
have that leadership style. Of course, that's familiar to us here in the
Yeah.
United States. We see that all the time. And
Mhm.
but they have it there. So I would say that I'm not a specialist.
Mhm.
Other people could come and give a better take than me, but I can tell you that in all these countries, conflict is boiling, and there's no doubt about it. Tom, why don't you?
Now, Keith,
Oh, by the
Keith,
way, let me
I
just
think
say you've had a massive drought in Kenya,
yes, yes,
where
yes,
you've
yeah.
had
You know,
literally millions of people food insecure. Now I'll give it back to Tom.
Keith, you underrate yourself too much. You're very humble in describing your deep knowledge of the continent and what goes on. I think for those who might not know, when Keith was congressman, I think you served on the Foreign Relations Committee, right?
Yep,
If
yep.
I remember correctly. So you sound like maybe they still give you some briefings. I don't know.
I read a lot and I talk to people.
Yeah, but I mean the conflicts are immense. I mean it's problematic, and I think what people don't realize is our former president did a lot of damage to the standing of the United States
Yeah,
in using its diplomatic muscle that it has had over the years. As you mentioned earlier, now what ends up happening is, a lot of these leaders we have on the continent now, you can sometimes hear them saying, hey, the Americans can no longer lecture us, because what do they know about democracy, because they just did what we do over here,
yeah,
trying to overturn an election, not accepting results, election results, and questioning the integrity of the election system. So, so it has really undermined uh, the work of the United States in trying to broker peace and bring about what we call democratic resolutions, things that actually can be sorted out diplomatic. Now, the Secretary of State was in the region, as you know, he was there last month, and some people might question whether he had any effect because of the pushback that he ends up receiving because of what happened here with January 7th.
right.
In the United States. So we really need to be very careful and realize that we really need to work hard as the United States now again to, basically regain our standing in the world as the beacon of democracy and so forth.
Tom, here's the reason I wanted to pursue this discussion along these lines. My
Mhm.
question becomes, what experiences do immigrants and first generation Americans who are from the Horn of Africa or from West Africa for that matter, what impact does the national news, the international news have on them? How are they personally affected by the challenges, climate change, poverty, or even wealth building and positive changes as well at home? And how do they uh, influence what is developing and can develop in Sudan, in Kenya, in Ethiopia? What's that relationship? How do they become arbiters or negotiators or influencers of American largesse and American power for the benefit of the home country? And that question leads to the next question, Keith, and that is, how do we assess and expand the role of African Americans in the American body politic in a way that has a consequence in the Caribbean, in South America, in Africa, that empowers us to see ourselves differently as navigators and as determiners, as partners in shaping, creating the world itself. So, Tom, what do you think? First of all, and then Keith, jump in.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, some people might not, I think Ali, this, and most other people who follow international news know this. I mean, the current president in Somalia is, the person who was served as president of Somalia used to be here, used to be in New York working as a civil servant before he went back, and became president, when they transitioned into, quote unquote democracy, and now the issue now is the one who is now involved in all these things with a power struggle with this prime minister, and things are just not going so well. But the immigrants here and refugees, they're actually very, very critical to what ends up happening back in Africa. I can speak in the case of Kenya, Somalia, Sudan, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Ghana. I mean, which are the communities that are more prevalent here in our state. And a lot of them play a very critical role. First of all, what we call remittances. Keith, you're familiar with this. Just supporting the budgets of a lot of these countries. I mean, some of the largest foreign exchange earnings for some of these countries now are actually from immigrants. They are nationals who now live here in the United States and other parts of the world, but specifically mostly North America and Europe. So those are corridors of where a lot of the money to support family back there. Otherwise, if it was not for some of these remittances, I think the social and political unrest that will be seen in some of these countries will be immense. Okay, because the poverty level for some of the population has been brought down because of the remittances a lot of people send back to those countries, which kind of lessens the burden, I will say, on some of the governments, on what this government should be able to do, but they're not able to do so. But their foreign nationals are able to kind of bring some budgetary support to tamp down on that potential social unrest that can happen, when people don't have food to eat, don't have, access to whatever money they need. And some of them have also gone on to play critical roles in government and industry and businesses back in these countries. That is for sure the case. Even in Somalia right now, a lot of the rebuilding that is happening is being done by folks from Minneapolis, the Twin Cities. A lot of the hotels you see in Mogadishu, the rebuilding, some of the hotels that have been bombed recently, when you read about a bomb just hit some modern hotel in Mogadishu, chances that the largest shareholder to that hotel is somebody from the Twin Cities are great. Okay. Same thing in Ethiopia. The diaspora. The diaspora was played a critical role in especially with the new government that came in of Abiy, the current, the one that now is being questioned. Hey, did he deserve the Nobel Peace Prize? So the diaspora continues to play a critical role, whether it's in terms of money, giving advice, going back to provide technical support services to the various governments and businesses. So they continue to play a critical role. So even myself, we are always doing dual things. We are active participants here in Minnesota, but we're also very active back in Kenya, Uganda, or wherever you're from. So that will never stop. That's the reality of life for the African immigrant here.
So, Keith, what does it mean? Because we, at one level, are African immigrants as well. We're the descendants of people that were immigrated or transported. I'm a product of the transatlantic slave trade. But I remain in my mind and in my spirit, though American, an African, though American, a Cuban, though American, a Jamaican, right? And so those things are not contradictory. I can be all of those. What does that mean in terms of how we conceive of a future and the world, Keith?
Well, the truth is that we all have to think of ourselves as, citizens of our local communities, our state, our country, and the rest of the world. Foreign policy has a direct impact on your life every single day. If you got some new neighbors who don't talk like you, don't dress like you, don't cook like you, there's a good chance that they're here because of some conflict around the world, which the United States may have tried to help to ease the suffering, or may have contributed to some of it, or both. We've seen both.
Yeah.
And so,
Very true.
whether it's population flows or whether it's remittances, as you said, making it difficult for hardworking Americans who have loved ones in East Africa to send money back to their loved ones in Africa means poverty in Africa, which means things like destabilization, right? That's what it means. Because the people who would give someone money to make a bomb, like Al Shabaab, they're not having any problems with the American banking system. They're getting their money from other sources.
Yeah.
So when we say no, we're going to restrict funds to the legitimate needs that people have through remittances, that is a destabilizing. And by the way, more money flows in remittances by maybe a factor of 10 or 20 than foreign aid, right? And by the way, no country can pull itself out of poverty through foreign aid. If you want to go from a poor country to a middle class country or a mid wealth country, it will be because you've engaged in international markets, or because you have money coming in from other sources like children or parents or something like that. So it's very important from a development standpoint. I would say that in the United States, you and I are both products. We're descendants. We're Afro descendants, both of us. And I could tell you the last time I had a family member who lived their life on the African continent was 1742, and her name was Kokwi, and she was from the Ive tribe, and she lived in Togo, what we call Togo today. And I run into friends who are Ive, and I say, I'm Ive too. They're like, man, you ain't Ive. What are you talking about? You don't even know what it is. I'm like, actually, I can prove that I am a descendant from there. But the point is that we're products of international foreign trade.
Yeah.
Al, you are a product of international foreign trade and globalization.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, Tom's roots are from East Africa, but if you go to places like, I hate to say this, but if you go to places like Basra in Iraq or Kuwait, or you go to Oman, you'll see people who are very African in their appearance because of these historical situations. And so I just say, I guess to sum it all up, we've got to be aware of what's going on around the world now.
Yes.
Because it might mean it'll mean it'll mean population flows, currency flows. It'll mean global health. I mean, one of the things that is global health is staring us all in the face when you look at COVID. That is a global health crisis.
Yes.
And if you think that some germ is going to stay where it is, no, it's not. It's going to come where you're at. And so those are just a few reasons why we've got to be globally aware, and there's many more.
Keith, let me make a hard turn here because I know you've got time situations. But you said last week in your press conference that justice wasn't served, but accountability was. And you were talking about the outcome of the trial of Kim Potter, charged with second and first degree manslaughter for the death of Dante Wright.
Right.
And talk about that statement in particular, what you meant by that. And I also I brought it in now because it has to do with the conversation we were having. Justice and accountability, not just in an individual tragedy, but what does it mean for the globe? And what does it mean for the standing of African people, of Black people here in this country, and our connections to people around the world? My family is also, like yours, Irish. And I think you've got Irish people in your family and other European. So all cousins, real cousins, real time. And so what do you think, Keith Ellison? Talk about the trial.
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say that, you know, Dante Wright, 20-year-old guy, whole life ahead of him. He could have done anything. He could have started a business. He could have gone into the building trades. He could have gotten interested in college and done that. His whole life was in front of him. He was the father of a newborn, and now his son will grow up without him. And this is important to keep in mind when we think about crime victims. And it's not just an injury to that person; it's an injury to their family. You know, um, if they celebrated, Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever, there was a table that was missing a seat,
Mhm.
right? And so I just stopped there and let us soak that in for a moment, because in the course of the case, the defense attorneys tried to throw a lot of mud towards Dante Wright. And my point is, he's a 20 years old guy. And how many people at 20 years old were still trying to figure out life, right? And you judge somebody by what they're doing at 20. And what about when they're 40? What about when they're 50? What about when they're 60? They might do literally anything. So I just wanted to just have people sort of contemplate the loss that we suffer because of his death. Now, we never argued that it was an intentional crime. We knew it wasn't. And that's why it wasn't charged as a murder, because it was clear that she intended to pull a taser, not a Glock 9mm. But we didn't prosecute her for what she tried to do. We prosecuted her for what she did do. And what she did is she shot a hollow point bullet through one lung, through his heart, and through the other lung. And he died within seconds. And that car rolled down the street and hit somebody else because he couldn't operate the car because he was dead.
Hmm.
So, look, I don't believe Kim Potter's a bad person at all. I think there's a lot of things in her life she did well, but she made a tragic, lethal mistake, and she shouldn't have made it, because for 19 years she carried a taser, and for 26 years she carried a gun, and she should know the difference, and she's trained to know the difference. So just can't say it's okay. Now look, 12 people, 12 randomly chosen Minnesotans, 9 of whom were white, found that she was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of both counts. So if we were wrong, then they should have said so. They certainly took a long time to think about it.
Mhm.
They weren't rushed into the conversation. So look, now the question is sentencing. Now I can't say much about that,
Mhm.
but what I will say is we need to think about the loss inflicted by this crime. And we also need to think about the fact that, she has done some good things in her life.
Mhm.
And that's just a fact. And look, some of my friends on the political left get angry when I say stuff like that, but I'm going to say it because it is true,
Mhm.
right? And so what we need, though, is a consistent application of
The
one rule
law.
of law. Nobody's above the law, nobody's beneath the law. Dante Wright is not beneath the law. He's not so low that he doesn't have the protection of the law. And Kim Potter is not so high and so exalted that she can escape the consequences of her actions. That's just the way it is. And building a society where there's a single rule of law, where nobody, based on their color or their ethnic background or their religion, is treated differently than anybody else. That is what we're striving for. That's not where we are. And
Leads.
so I'll
Go ahead.
say that we're going to keep on striving for it. And again, we're not operating out of malice. We're not operating out of a sense of revenge. I refused to do that. I will not do that. But we're going to try to be fair and just with due regard to the loss that the Wright family has suffered and that our community has suffered.
Will the state ask for an upward departure on the sentencing guidelines?
Right now, we are contemplating all that. I'm not prepared to make a comment about that.
Mhm.
Um, you know, uh, there are grounds for it. Um, but I mean, a lot of people like Derek Chauvin is fresh in their mind. This man had, you know, well over 10, 15 complaints. He
Mhm.
actually committed a human rights abuse and a crime, which he pled guilty to. I'm
Mhm.
not just talking about George Floyd. I'm talking about a 14-year-old kid.
Right.
He took responsibility for that one. We're not talking about the same kind of people. We're
Mhm.
not. We're just not. And I'm not going to make anybody an example, and I'm
Mhm.
not going to make anybody the target of revenge. We're talking about there's a big difference between revenge and justice.
Mhm.
There's a big difference between the two. We can't operate, we cannot do what people who have historically oppressed African Americans have done and then call ourselves more just than them, right? You can't do you can't do what the person who you criticize does and then say that you're operating at a higher moral level than them, right? Am I right?
That's
I
correct.
If
Yeah.
you're going to operate at a higher moral level, you've got to have different set of principles at work.
Shift
Now the
to
trial was about what happened. Next it will be about what are we going to do.
okay.
Two separate questions, and I wish I could share more about what we plan on, but there's a whole lot of conversations before I'll be ready to share that. But I do think people have a right to share their views. I mean, it's a public trial. They can send their letters in. They can say what they think is appropriate, what they think is right. If you do that, send a letter to the court, send your letter to a defense, and send your letter to the prosecution, and tell them how you feel. And I can guarantee you, the letter will be read and will be thought through.
How does all this affect the civil case that will come from this?
Well, in many ways, they're separate
Mhm.
because the criminal case must be proved by the state beyond a reasonable doubt, each and every element of the defense beyond a reasonable doubt. Civil case just has to prove that it's more likely than not.
Mhm.
Well, criminal case is asking the question: did she violate the law, the criminal statute, the criminal law?
Mhm.
The civil case is saying, did she violate his civil rights? And they're not completely separate, but they're not completely the same. There's overlap, but they're slightly different questions. In the criminal case, we're asking, what did Kim Potter do? In a civil case, the question might be asked, what about the policies of Brooklyn Center,
Mhm.
right? What about the policies of the department itself? So these are all up in the so this it's not exactly the same. So the civil case is under Section 1983, which is part of the Ku Klux Klan Act of the 1870s, right? And because back in the day, when state actors abuse African American civil rights, you could sue to hold them accountable civilly in federal court, because the state court, you can forget about it. There was no justice there. So now these are vestiges of a bygone era, but still very useful in terms of people bringing their rights forward.
The in recent weeks, well, a few days ago, I saw Ben Crump doing a
Yeah,
press
great man.
conference on State Farm. So I want to draw this connection here, if there is one. You can tell
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
He announced a lawsuit on behalf of a State Farm employee who said she experienced discrimination and retaliation. And in announcing this publicly, he detailed the experiences she had and said others would be coming forward, invited others to come forward to build this complaint into a class action suit. But the main
Hmm.
thing is that he used the power of his platform. This was in connection with the Rainbow Push Coalition in Chicago, Jesse Jackson's organization, to create a
Sure.
broad general net or awareness through which he wanted to invite others to both be aware and to find a way to express their experiences. That happened last week. So the point I'm looking at is um, the Ben Crump, on behalf of an advocate or as an advocate for someone who felt she was wronged by her employer. Then we have the story in Minneapolis that we reported on in Insight News, where a young man was detained while attempting to deposit or cash his check at a bank in South Minneapolis where he had an account. And they suspected that the document was fraudulent. And when I wrote about this, it worked out where they had a settlement and apologies, et cetera. But as I thought about it and wrote about it, Keith, it took me back to one other transaction. And that's a transaction in South Minneapolis where a person came in with a financial document. And that encounter resulted, as we know, in the death of George Floyd. So the question then is, where are we, good, bad, or indifferent, as a society? Where are we as African Americans, as people of color, in our bid for equity, fairness, balance, compassion, consideration, and for freedom from institutionalized invisibility and therefore oppression? And do things like Attorney Crump and others paying particular attention and elevating these things that were considered isolated incidents, though they weren't, elevating them to a point of national and international visibility, what does that do for us? What do you think? I mean, is it a fair
200,
question? Yeah.
246 years of slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow segregation, and about 60 years of multiracial democracy with disparities in every aspect of American life.
Mhm.
That's what we got, man.
That says it
You
all.
know, and sprinkle in there, that the first uh very difficult, the first tragic incident between police and black communities that I've been able to put my hands on um was the Chicago riots of 1919.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not talking about white mobs attacking black communities. Of course, there's many going back to right after slavery,
Rosewood. Yeah.
Rosewood, but then there's the Colfax massacre in Louisiana. There's a lot.
Mhm.
But the one where there was a tragic incident between police and community, a protest, civil unrest, and then a study investigative committee which issued a report,
Mhm.
the 1919 Chicago riot. And they said in that report pretty much what they said in the 21st century policing document, which was commissioned by President Obama after Ferguson. I mean, you could just, 1919, 1935 Harlem riot, 1943 Harlem riot, 1967 Macomb Commission, LA riot. Oh, and then everything from Teaneck to Cincinnati, Miami, Detroit, now like, LA again. Then, of course, now recently we got Minneapolis. We got, this is a chronic historic
Mhm. Yeah.
problem. And we are driving toward multiracial democracy where everybody's treated equally, where justice is blind. That's what we're looking for.
Mhm.
That's what we're striving for. And sadly, is a substantial minority in our country who doesn't want to live on a free, equal, non-racial basis, who wants to say, no, 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 we want to maintain our historic privileges over you.
Mhm.
And you could, look, it was the Federal Housing Administration that said you could not get a home loan unless you had a racially restrictive covenant in the deed,
Mhm.
and that black people, you can rent from somebody at whatever they choose to rent to you at, maybe only in a certain part of town. Oh, how many years of sundown towns
Mhm.
where if you don't get out of town by a certain amount of time, you take your life in your hands.
Yeah, like maybe Northeast
Right.
Minneapolis used to be. Yeah.
Northeast no used to be that way. Edina was a sundown town.
Mhm.
Dearborn, Michigan was a notorious sundown
And
town.
Golden Valley was as well.
Golden
Yeah.
Valley. They're all around us. And
Mhm.
so we wake up in 2021 and somebody says, well, why don't them black people just stop complaining about racism? I'm like, well, wait a minute. 246 years of Jim Crow slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow, 60 years of multiracial democracies with disparities in everything. That's what we got. We didn't get fair housing until 1968,
Mhm.
right? And so, and then we've had setbacks since then. Yeah, we passed the Voting Rights Act in '65, but then you have the case with Will Scalia struck down major portions of the Voting Rights Act just a few years ago. So 2013, so we are in this effort to try to build a multiracial democracy with civil and human rights for everyone, no discrimination against anyone, and it's hard because some people they don't want. I mean, they're young people walking through the crowd in Charlottesville, Virginia, saying Jews will not replace us.
Yeah.
I mean, who's trying to replace you?
Mm-hmm.
What are you even talking about?
Mm-hmm.
From a black perspective, it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
There's been one black president out of the whole history of America, and people freak out like they're like like it's still not awesome to be a Caucasian person in America today. I mean, it's pretty good. I mean, every every major corporation,
Yeah.
every governorship, major. I mean, it's still. I mean, things are still pretty tough to be a racial minority in America, even despite the fact that things have gotten better. And I will applaud people who do embrace America's um, multiracial character and equal rights under the law. The fact is, Kim Potter was convicted by a jury of 12 people. 9 of them were white people. So there is a movement. I mean, we're moving better than we're moving. I mean, for people who want good news, the good news is most people want a fair country where everybody has to do what they're supposed to do. But all you got to do is look at January 6th, and you can see some people, as they're waving Confederate flags, having T-shirts that say Camp Auschwitz.
Mm-hmm.
They're not there. They're not there.
Let's pivot. Let's pivot to the national for the last few minutes here and talk about the party, the Democratic Party. You've been a leader in the National Party. Where is the convergence now, or the collaboration between the Bernie wing and the mainstream, or the Biden wing of the party? And do you see them coalescing in a way that's going to deliver the Build Back Better promises of the Biden administration? Certain things have happened. Infrastructure has happened in part, but the voting rights question and the social network question, where do you see it going, and how do we make it happen?
And actually, let me just tag on to that question. The other one on the Build Back Better, for example, I know they just say they'll try and see if they can split up the bill into parts, so they can at least get some wins. Your thoughts on that would be great, to see if that's even possible, whether anything will happen if you split it up, because there isn't much time in the calendar between now and the next election, in 8 months basically.
Well, let me just share with you. You got to question the fairness of a system where one person, and I'm talking about Senator Manchin, together with his, partner, Senator Sinema, where two people can just hold up the will of the majority of the country. It's just not. It's an unfair system. There shouldn't be a filibuster. It's not in the Constitution. Historically, it has been used to stop human rights. The filibuster was used to stop anti-lynching legislation. The filibuster is not a good thing, and I think that it should be done away with. But even if they won't do away with it, they should do away. Okay, so Manchin, let's just get rid of it only for the vote on voting rights.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, so you love it so much, fine. But let me just tell you this: a lot of people may not agree with me on this. My thing is, it's better to get something than nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Some people think it's better to get nothing than to not get everything. I mean, some people think if I can't get everything, I don't want anything. I don't think like that. That's not, my mind doesn't work that way. I'm telling you that our country has been operating on the basis of Eisenhower era infrastructure, and we had a bridge fall down here a few years ago, and that's was catastrophic. And it's time to invest seriously in American infrastructure. So I'm glad the infrastructure bill got passed. I think it was important to pass it. I also think Build Back Better is important to pass, because we have had a divestment in social services in our country for many years. We've had more money go. We've had massive tax cuts for the wealthy and big companies. At the same time, and it's all been paid for by stripping social safety net for people. So, while I never used the phrasing of defund the police, that's not phrasing I used and would not use it. I do know what people mean is that other systems have been defunded. Healthcare, education, housing have been, in fact, defunded. And as a result, it is compounded poverty for a lot of people. So I think we do need to make those investments and build back better. So Tom, what I would do is I mean, you got to deal you can't deal with what you wish you had. You got to deal with what you have. So I would enter in negotiations with Manchin and Sinema and say, okay, what parts of this can we do? There's got to be some things, and I think if I was president, I definitely would cut as much student debt as I could. I mean, student debt is killing our consumer-based economy. I mean, look at all the young people who are not forming households, not buying washers and dryers, not engaging in independent adult activity, living in mom and dad's basement because they got massive student debt on top of their shoulders. So there are a number of things that need to be done, and I think that it's important for Biden to do them. I will commend Biden on a number of things, though. I think he's done a good job with as good as can be done with the pandemic. I think he's done as good a job as can be done with the infrastructure and other things. Even with the withdrawal of Afghanistan, it might have been messy, but with getting out of wars is messy. I'm sorry, but it just is. And you got to do the best you can. What is our alternative? Stay there forever? Whose son and daughter is gonna go there for a war that will never be won? So I mean, I thought I was not critical of him for the way he left Afghanistan. It was long past time to leave Afghanistan. So I think that the biggest problem Biden has is telling a story of success, because every Republican's going to want to make it like, oh, he's the worst ever. But are Dems going to buy that nonsense? I mean, if you go to Plymouth, Minnesota, to the parents of young veterans and say, do you want your son or daughter to go to Afghanistan interminably, indefinitely? They're going to say no. And all the people complaining, they don't have no kids over there.
No.
My son spent 5 years in the United States Army. I don't want my son going to Afghanistan. Right. And so, I think that he's been doing a good job. I think Biden's been doing a good job, but look, you got problems with inflation to be sure. Housing is up, rents are up. You got some real challenges going on in the economy, and but I will tell you this: I think that by time the summer comes, I really do believe that more and more people will be vaccinated. You will be seeing a leveling off and a trailing off. I don't think the pandemic will be over, but I think it will be different for the better. I think some of the supply chain issues are going to work themselves out. Prices will level out. And I think that the infrastructure bill is going to spur job creation. So I think that there's reasons to be hopeful and optimistic. What I will say to the Democratic Party is the reason that you win, particularly in Minnesota, is not just because of the Bernie people who are going to go knock doors and get out there and be really motivated. It's also because of some of these Democratic middle of the road folks. Minnesota is a Democratic state because of a coalition between the center left and the left. And if you allow the right to crack you and divide you, you're going to lose the state. Right now, Democrats control the governorship, lieutenant governorship, attorney general's office, secretary of state's office, and the state auditor, and both senators. But if we start dividing ourselves, that could change. And look at how bad the Republicans have behaved. They literally tried to take an armed insurrection against the counting of the vote.
Yeah.
And now they're being discovered as members of Congress have participated and helped it along. It should be easy for us to win. But If we form the circular firing squad, we may not.
Yeah, hey, Keith, quick
Go ahead.
question. Maybe Keith can answer it in 30 seconds or less, even, because you are a lawyer and you are also a legislator. Of course, you are a legislator, now you're attorney general. I keep reading somewhere that, and also part of another discussion that I might, about student loans.
Yeah.
Does the president have the authority to, without Congress, to actually wipe out the federal student loans? Can he do that without having to,
Go through Congress.
go through
No,
Congress?
I think that he can wipe out some of it, but not the entire amount.
Mhm.
I think that there is a certain portion he can do. Um, I think that it's something that our country has to really drill down and talk about,
Mhm.
because I do think that, if you look at past generations, they just didn't carry this massive debt. I
Correct.
mean, I'm 58 years old, and when I graduated from college, I had a total, not college, when I graduated from law school, I had a
Mhm.
total debt of $12,000.
Mhm.
Kids pick that up in a semester nowadays.
Yeah,
Kids are graduating with
it's crazy.
$100,000 in debt, and it's
Super
wrong.
crazy.
It's there's no good. I mean, it's just not right. It's no way. It's just wrong. And I just think we've got to figure out how. And by the way, 70% of the American economy is driven by consumer spending.
Mhm.
If all the money is going to debt service, people aren't buying movie tickets. They're not buying popcorn. They're not going to dinner. They're not doing a lot of things that
Yeah.
really do help drive the economy. So student debt is actually a lag on the entire business sector. And the one thing I've never really understood about how some folks in the Chamber of Commerce think is that, why are you letting one part of your group undermine the other part of your group? I mean,
Mhm.
why are you letting your healthcare people basically run your auto manufacturers out of business? Why are you letting your polluters, run your people who run the fishing industry and the the people, the vacation industry? Why are you letting them destroy? Why are you letting your oil industry ruin your fish industry? You know, in the Gulf of Mexico. I've never really understood how they think.
I
It
think
must
that.
be just that if you're the biggest dog, you get to step on everybody else, and
Mhm.
nobody can say anything about it. But there are things that we do in our economy that are absolute. They say, "Oh, you're not pro business." Which business are you talking about? I might be. If I'm a shrimper in the Gulf, yeah, I'm mad about what BP did.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's my
Sure.
business,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I am trying to sell pizza, of course I don't want some big bank making all kinds of money on the interest of student loan debt, because you're driving that kid into poverty. They're not buying any pizza from me.
Mhm.
So we've got to think about the economy, how it impacts everybody, you know, and how certain industries really do harm other industries, and what's the overall benefit. I mean, look, a market is a social institution.
Mhm.
It has its rules, constructed by men and women. We can change them so that the overall economic benefit is best for everybody.
Everyone.
We did it in the past. That's what antitrust laws are all about. That's what environmental regulations are all about. That's what all these things are all about. And the catalytic converter has been a good thing for our society. People don't die from air quality related
Hmm.
illnesses because of it. You know, so
Keith,
that's
we're
sort of
we're
my
down to
take.
30 seconds. Last, how about a New Year's wish? I'll give you mine. Thanks again to you, and Happy New Year to you.
You
Season's
too.
Yes.
greetings. What are your wishes for our community, our country?
My wish is that people will see the value in each other, that we will
Mhm.
resolve our conflicts peacefully, that we will see that we have one planet and we're kind of ruining it, and we'll recognize the dignity in every person. Those are my wishes. Those are my prayers.
We'll end it there. Keith Ellison, Attorney General of Minnesota. Thank you so much. Good to see you, brother. Tom Guitar, thank you for co-hosting today.
Thanks,
I'm Al
Al. Thank you.
McFarlane. This is
Yes.
Conversations with Al McFarlane. We'll see